Hi everyone, I have a really fun set of projects for you today. We are going to use the Christmas Selfies stamp set by MFT Stamps to make a pair of Christmas cards. First, I'm going to show you how to make a version with Copic markers. And then second, I'm going to show you how to make a version with colored pencils in case that is your preferred coloring medium of choice. So let's get right into it with the Copic markers version. To start, I'm going to take this Hero Hues white pigment ink and I'm going to ink up this large 6x6 Christmas text stamp by MFT Stamps, and it has lots of Christmassy words on there like "'tis this season, joy to the world," all sayings like that. And I'm just pressing my A2 size piece of fog cardstock into that stamp, and that looks good to me. I got a nice impression with all those fun Christmassy, wintry sayings. And then I'm going to take the white pigment ink and use a blender brush to just kind of scrub along the edges so that it looks like just a snowy border. That was the look that I was going for with this. And I don't mind if the print is getting smudged. It's just supposed to add a little hint of something to our design. And there's what the finished panel looks like. Now we're going to work on our focal panel. And to do so, I am stamping one of the images from the Christmas Selfies stamp set. There are 6 of them and they're all really super adorable. This is the one of Santa and Rudolph. And I'm going to take my Copic markers and just fill in the background to start. That's usually how I like to start with my Copic panels. For whatever reason, I just like to do the background first. Because usually the background is usually the easier part of the coloring. It's kind of like a nice way to ease into things. And then we're going to start coloring in the face on Santa. So that's usually the second thing I always do is color in the skin tone on any images that need it in my drawing or on my stamped image. And I'm using E01 for the base, which is a little different than I usually do. E01 is good for children or if you want to give a rosy complexion. And I just thought that Santa was perfect to have that nice rosy complexion. So we started with a base of E01 instead of E00. And then I used E13 and E11 to add the shading to his face. For the red areas, I'm just mapping out where my lightest area is with my YR12. I love using YR12 as my highlight color when I'm coloring with red. And now I'm adding in my darkest areas with my darkest red, the R39. So like the crease in the elbow, the sides of the hat, the little crease in Santa's hat, they're all going to get the darkest red color here. And now I'm going to take my mid-tone. I actually have 2 mid-tones for my reds in this piece. We're going to use R29 and R24. So I'm just starting with the R29 and just blending out a little bit from where we had placed our R39. And then I'm going to fill in whatever is left with my R24, leaving the tiniest bit of that orange showing. And then I'm going to go over the center of those areas with a YR12 just to keep the highlight in place. And then just touch things up a little bit until it looks good to me. It looks like all the shadows are where they need to be and all the highlights are where they need to be. And now we can move on to Rudolph. So for Rudolph, we're going to color the little bell on his collar with some yellow tones, Y21, 26, and 28, which I think is a great combination for gold items. And then for Rudolph's body, we're going to use some E40s. And if I did this again, I would probably use the E30s. I just found that the brown here was a little bit dull. I do usually use this brown combination for little critters, including if I were to do a reindeer. But because this picture is so whimsical and fun, it might have been nicer to have a more reddish brown here. So it's just something to think about when you're choosing what color you want to make your Rudolph. I think the E50s would also work really, really well. And don't get me wrong, this looks pretty good. It's just, I think if I did it again, I would have a more like rosy, yellowish orange brown like the E30s. So to color it, I am just going to leave the center like by his snout, and then on his body and on his arm a little bit light, just to make him look more rounded. And then for the antlers, I'm going to use some E41, the slightest bit. And then for his hooves, I'm using some dark browns, the E47, 44, and 49. You could also use some neutral blacks there. That would work nicely too. For the shadowy areas on Santa's hat and on his beard, I'm going to use W5 and then blend that in with a W1. I find like that is a nice way to blend shadows into white, to go to a mid-tone and then to a very, very light tone. So instead of going Y5 to Y3, I usually go Y5 to Y1. No, W5 to W1 when I'm shading in whites like this. And now for the beard, I wanted it to look like he has a curly beard because the outside edges of the image are rounded. So to do that, I just put a whole bunch of little crescents or half C's around his beard area. And I started with the W5 and then went over it with some W3 and W1. And then I'm going to blend everything together with W0. And there's really no wrong way to do that. Just have a little bit of fun making crescents kind of wherever they feel like they should be, and then just blend them out until it kind of gives the appearance of a little, like a little curl. Now I am going to cut out our little Santa and Rudolph selfie. And now we're going to take the panel that we had worked on earlier, pop it up on some foam tape. I'm making sure that that whole panel is covered, and then we're going to put it onto a white A2 size card base, and that looks very nice to me. And then this is a little photo die by MFT, and then we're just going to stamp your Insta Famous. This stamp comes from the Picture Perfect stamp set that was released a few months ago. So this was their first MFT Stamps first selfies stamp set. I don't know if you remember it with the little like kittens and little dogs. And then I think there was even like a little monkey in there too. And now they've done one for Christmas with these Christmas selfies. And I'm just going to pop up our little Christmas selfie on some foam tape as well. And then attach it to the front of the card on a little bit of a diagonal. And then this sentiment, have your selfie, a merry little Christmas, is part of the Christmas selfie stamp set. I'm just going over the eyes with some black glaze pen just to make them pop. And then that's it for our Copic colored version. So let's take one last look at that before we move on to our colored pencils version. I think that's so cute. I just love that Santa is giving the peace sign in that photo. Okay, so for card number 2, we're going to do a little bit of a different background. So we are still using the Fog cardstock, and we're going to use white pigment ink, but I'm using a Snowflake Stencil by Honeybee Stamps. And we're going to just apply the pigment ink around the edges of our card panel. And I want the edges darkest and then the center part the lightest so that it kind of fades out towards the middle. And I'm just going to keep working on a good blend here. And I've taped my cardstock to the stencil so that it doesn't move around. Now I'm going to peel it up. And I just love how that looks. And then to make it even prettier, we're going to add some ice spruce distress oxide ink around the edges. I saw this card by Debbie Hughes. Probably everyone has seen it with the pine cones and the iced spruce distress oxide inked panel. And I just fell in love with it. So I wanted to really play around with this ice spruce distress oxide ink. It's not a color I usually use, but I was definitely inspired by that card by Debbie. So now I'm going to take some white gouache. This is also a trick that I learned from watching Debbie Hughes videos, something she does very, very well. I'm just adding some white splatters all across the back of our card. And I love that. It looks like it could be like a really, really heavy snowstorm. And I just love the misty look that ice spruce distress oxide ink gives the edges of our card panel. And now that looks good to me. And I'm going to set it aside to dry while we work on our colored pencil image. So now I'm using VersaFine Black Onyx ink to stamp the image because it's nice and clear and crisp, and it works very, very well with colored pencils. So this is the first time I've used colored pencils in a long, long time. I don't profess to be an expert, but I love watching other people use their colored pencil on craft cardstock, and I thought I would give it a try for this video. So these are Polychromos pencils. I think this white that I'm using here is a Prismacolor pencil, or maybe not. At some point, I kind of switch off between the Prismacolor and the Polychromos white pencils. I find that I just, I get a nicer white with the Prismacolor white pencil than I feel I do with the Polychromos one. So that's why you might see some different kinds of pencils in this video. So for the edges of the body, I'm using some warm gray to just shade in the edges of our little polar bear and like wherever there's a crease. So like the crease of his wrist, the crease underneath his arm. And then I'm going to color in his earlobes with some flesh tone Polychromos pencils. I didn't keep track of the colors I was using. I don't really use my Polychromos that often. I don't know what colors I used. I honestly can't really see the print on them. It's really, really tiny print. So I just kind of grabbed the pretty colors that look like they would work well, and that's what I used for this video. I'm adding some shading with some black, like right under the scarf and right above it, and then under the hat, just to make it look a little bit dramatic looking. And then I will blend everything together with a warm gray. And for the nose, we're going to use some black, and I'm leaving the center pretty light. And then for the gift and the fluff on the hat and the little pom-pom on the end of the hat, I just use some white. And now we're going to color in the hat red, and I'm using my darkest color along the edges and like wherever there'd be a shadow or a crease on the hat or on our little package. And I'm going to leave the center parts pretty light. And we're going to go in and add some highlight color in a second. So I started with some white for the highlight color, and I'm just experimenting here. I don't often use pencils, so I don't really have a go-to technique just yet. And then I thought I'd add a little color to that highlight with a peach colored Polychromos pencil. Now I'm just playing around, blending everything together until the red looks pretty to me, and that looks good. And now we're going to color in the scarf. And for the scarf, I used a different pressure, so I'm going very, very lightly now as I shade in that first layer of the scarves. And again, I'm just experimenting here because I don't often use pencils, so I was trying some lighter strokes here and there. I was trying to press down really hard to, make like a real waxy appearance in some areas. Sometimes I made it really waxy on accident, but I tried to fix it. And I'm just kind of playing and just adding a little highlight in the center and then blending it. I'd love to hear from you in the comments if you often color with colored pencils and if you have any tips for me as I am starting my journey, like playing around with colored pencils. So I actually have 3 different sets of colored pencils at home. I have the Prismacolor pencils, which were, I think, my first set and the first thing I tried coloring with, but I didn't honestly spend that much time with them. And then I got these Polychromos pencils maybe a year or so ago after I saw everyone else on YouTube and Instagram using them and raving about them, especially on craft cardstock. And I used them a few times and I like them enough, but the Copics are my first love. And then I just found out about these Luminance, I might not be pronouncing that right, Luminance pencils, Luminance, something like that. And they were really expensive. So I was like, oh, they're really expensive. They must be really, really good. So I purchased a set of those, and I'm going to show you a little image that I colored in with them at the end of this video. And I use them for the first time today. And they're interesting. So they're not as pleasant to color with as these Polychromos are. And I tried coloring on some craft cardstock as well as some Stonehenge colored pencils cardstock that's especially made for that. And both experiences were so. Like, I think it looks pretty, but it wasn't as much fun as I'm having here, just kind of blending with my polychromo. So I'm not sure what's going to be my go-to in the future, or if I'm just going to abandon ship with colored pencils and just like focus on my Copics as I have been doing. We'll see. So now I'm just finishing up our coloring here with our background, and I just love that turquoise blue. And then I'm going to stamp the image again, just to make sure that the black pops. And I did this also with a Copic marker. No, I didn't do that with a Copic marker version because you don't need to with Copics. But for this pencil version, I did. And I think it makes a world of difference because the colored pencil will kind of dull the black lines. And then I'm just going to cut out our little polar bear bearing a gift into a little square. And then I'm going to add some snow. And I'm using a white gel pen for this. And I'm going to start by laying down some thick snowflakes. And now I'm just going to add tiny little specks of white. So we have some snow in the forefront of the scene, some snow way back into the distance. And it's just snowy, snowy, snowy all around our polar bear. And he has no snow on him whatsoever. Sometimes I like putting the snow on top of my images, but for this one, I just thought it would pop more to have the snow in the background. So that's why I did that. Now I'm going to take our little photo frame again that I cut out from an MFT Stamps die. And I'm going to use this season greeting stamp that's part of the new Christmas card kit by MFT Stamps. I also think you can purchase this separately. And I'm just going to layer 2 of the picture frames together. I found that when I did this, it looked a little bit nicer than just having a single layer on top of the photo. And I just love that classic font of the season's greetings. I'm going to take my tape runner, add some adhesive, and then apply that right on top of our little polar bear. And there he is. He's so cute, and he looks so happy to give his gift to his loved one. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What do you think is in the polar bear's gift box, and who do you think he's giving a gift to? In fact, I will send a box of cards to the best answer in the comments below. I have so many cards. I've been meaning to do a giveaway, and this will be the perfect giveaway to kind of start things up or to kick things off. So let me know, what do you think is in the polar bear's gift box, and who do you think the gift is for? And you can win a box of cards from me. All right, so that looks so pretty. And that does it for our second card. Now I am going to show you the other project I've been working on. So the top is a version with Copic markers, and then the bottom is the one that I use with those Luminance colored pencils. So I think they're wax based. Their claim to fame is that they will not dull, that the color will not dull. Supposedly for over 100 years, that's the claim that they make. And I'm just kind of getting used to it. I like how the beard looks with the colored pencils, but I feel like I have to really experiment with the colors and just figure out how hard to press into the paper with the rest of it. So I have a lot of practicing to do if I want to continue with my Luminance colored pencils. All right, everyone, that's all I have for now. Let me know in the comments what you think is in the polar bear's gift box, and I will select a winner by next Sunday. Have a great day, and I will see you again next weekend.